Okay, for editing purposes, I'm going to do this. 3, 2, 1. Greetings. My name is John Raffaele, and I am the Director of Educational Services with the National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals. And we are here in our first episode, our first installment of Let's Talk for the year 2026. And I'm very excited about this particular topic because it deals with food and eating and swallowing, but it's really all about, more than anything, it's about our role in supporting people who may have issues in and around eating and swallowing and so forth. And we have not only an ethicist with us today, but we also have a speech language pathologist, and she'll say what that is in just a second. Going to be a good Let's Talk. Before we begin the formality, Let's Talk has been around a long time. It's a companion webinar series that explores and dives deeper into each monthly installment of something called the International Journal for Direct Support Professionals. You can, I'll give you access to that and how to get that at the very end of our webinar, but it's a monthly publication that is devoted to and geared towards the best practices for direct support professionals. And so what the Let's Talk series is taking each one of these articles and hearing from the authors of these articles, and hearing about things that direct support professionals often don't have an opportunity to get much development or training in and around. And that's what the purpose of the Let's Talk series is to give direct support professionals an opportunity to hear from experts in certain areas where they would likely not get much training or frankly, exposure. So the International Journal is available through me, but it's also available through a website, which I'll give you at the very end of our broadcast. This is a joint project. This is an international project sponsored by the National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals and VITA Community Living Services, which is in Canada, Toronto, Canada. And we've been working together and partnered together as two organizations to provide this series and this journal for well over a decade. And that's my email address. And again, I'll give you the specifics at the very end of this webinar as to where you can get the journals and reach out to the authors. One other thing, and then we're going to get right to the topic. This is a pre-recorded webinar. We're not live. Well, we're live. You know what I'm getting at. You're watching this and this has been recorded. So if you have burning questions, comments, that's wonderful. You'll just have to put them in an email to me at that particular email address. Again, I'll give you that at the end, and we can go from there. All right, let's do this. Let's do this. This is our official title, the official title of the article that was published in the International Journal for Direct Support Professionals, Swallowing Complexities. Ooh. Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities and Ethics. That is a mouthful, no pun intended. Well, actually, no, it was pun intended. But that, look at the bottom there, the role of direct support professionals as they support eating, right? As they support eating. Sounds, wow, really? We're going to have a webinar on eating? Yeah, damn right. Eating and swallowing, because I'll tell you this, direct support professionals every day, several times a day, they're assisting people with this process of what we might take for granted called eating. We're going to get to that in a second. Who do we have with us today? Who are the incredible authors of this wonderful article? Here they are. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Maya, who are you?
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me and for tuning in, for everyone who's watching. I'm a speech language pathologist and a PhD student in rehabilitation science. I'm from Toronto. I'm studying at a place called McMaster University, just outside Toronto in Hamilton, Ontario. And clinically, I work as a speech language pathologist and have worked full time as an SLP before going back to for my PhD. And still do, across a variety of settings, with children, with adults, in outpatients and inpatient settings, and definitely have encountered many patients who age with an intellectual developmental disability, many patients with dementia, with or without an intellectual disability. And I'm excited to share a little more with Andrea today about some decision making. I think something else Andrea and I will share quickly is just a little bit about our roles, because we know not everyone might know what's an ethicist and what's a speech language pathologist. When we think about kind of your clients, your patients, whatever terms you're using, and they're eating and drinking, there's kind of different facets to it. So if you think of a dietitian, their role is maybe more kind of the nutritional content of the food. Is it the salt or the fat or the protein, or, what calories does this person need in a day? That's not the role of a speech language pathologist. That's typically managed by a dietitian. But what we look at is typically the safety and efficiency of swallowing. So we would assess people in terms of their chewing, also in terms of the cognitive pieces of swallowing, of can they open their mouth, can they follow instructions, and also what we would call like the pharyngeal and the pharynx, here, your throat phases of the swallow, where, how is the food going down towards the food pipe instead of the wrong way towards your airway. So the safety piece is we're looking at, is there a risk of food or drink going down towards a patient's lungs? Are they coughing or clearing their throat, which may indicate that it could be going the wrong way, or a risk of that? Or also other pieces of the efficiency of the swallowing. So maybe it's safe, maybe they're protecting their airway and we're not concerned about that, but maybe it's not efficient. Maybe things are stuck in their throat. It's not all making it to the stomach. Or the meal times are really, really difficult or challenging for them and taking a long time and not efficient. So those are typically like the two pillars we think about for our role in the area of dysphagia or swallowing problems, really looking at that safety and efficiency. And I always say that our role is not to tell patients or families what to do in line with ethics. Like we do assess those pieces and then kind of work with each person, client, family to make tailored decisions and give them the information they need to help them make decisions that they want for their own lives. So that was a bit of a long explanation, but I think important in case you have a client or patient who may need that area of support to know what we do.
Right. Thank you, Maya. That's great. And yeah, you keep saying patient and client, and my goodness, we generally our community uses the person supported. But if
Okay.
somebody's in the hospital and they're receiving services from a doctor, generally it's a patient. So again, I don't want to belabor that, but that's all. Often we'll get that. Why is she talking about patients? I don't work with patients. Okay, well, just calm down, people. Just calm down.
Well, that's helpful to know, though. I can definitely use the language of person you support. I like that better, anyways.
Yeah. But no, I appreciate your background. Andrea, who are you? We've seen you before, Andrea. Who are you?
You have. I've seen you before as well, John. I'm so excited to be here with Maya today. So I'm Andria Bianchi, if we haven't met before, and I'm what's called a clinical ethicist or a bioethicist, supporting a few different places in the Toronto region. So a couple of different hospitals and then a large developmental sector agency called Surrey Place. And what ethicists mostly do is help people like direct support professionals and others try to figure out how to move forward when there is a really, really, really sticky situation on their hands. So when you're not sure what you should do, and should is the key word here, then ethicists are available to support and facilitate a decision-making process focusing on the ethics and hopefully helping people feel comfortable in their decision-making journey. And I know direct support professionals encounter challenging circumstances all the time. So John, you and I have had some conversations about, well, how do you make decisions and all the distress that DSPs encounter. So really delighted to be here again.
Yep. And this area, particularly eating and swallowing and the food safety, dysphagia, as you talked about. My gosh, it's something that DSPs deal with on a literally daily basis. So let's get into this. Thank you both for being here. Let's do it. I love the article because it talks about Mr. J, who loves food that I love. But Mr. J has got, he's got some stuff going on. He's got some dementia happening and so forth. And he loves chocolate. Oh, he loves chocolate. So in the article, you introduce Mr. J. So remind us of some key aspects related to him. And what can direct support professionals learn from that story? Again, give us a background of Mr. J, and how this can frame the rest of our discussion.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much. Thank you. And so, yeah, Mr. J, I hope that Mr. J is a familiar kind of person that maybe some of you who are tuning into this would have encountered, or maybe right now you have a Mr. J who you are supporting. And so, Mr. J, I'll just give some of the high level pieces here. Mr. J is 78 years old, and he has diagnoses of intellectual developmental disability and also Alzheimer's dementia. He's been in your group home, or in the same group home, for 20 years. He has a really, really good relationship with everyone working at the home. We can imagine that he has a really big personality, incredibly friendly, such that the direct support professionals maybe feel like they are his family. Perhaps there has been actually some of those comments made, just given how long he's been with you for. We can have a whole conversation about that at another time. So Mr. J is in your group home, and he has a number of decisions, of course, that have to be made about his care, about his life on a daily basis. For a lot of decisions, especially as his dementia is progressing, he has not been considered capable of consenting, especially if it comes to, medications, perhaps, and some complex aspects of his life. So because of this, and we've had a whole separate webinar on decision making and on consent and capacity, if I remember correctly, but you can correct me, John.
No, we did. We did.
Thank you. So I think that he's found incapable of a lot of things. And so in those circumstances, people are turning to his substitute or his surrogate decision maker, who is his sister, to make a lot of decisions. So we're turning to his sister a lot. And right now, the area of Mr. J's life that we're focusing on is in relation to food and feeding and swallowing. And so Mr. J has always loved food. However, he's been pretty particular about specific kind of sensory preferences. Favorite foods include crispy pepperoni pizza, spaghetti, Caesar salad. Perhaps those of you tuning in can also relate to some of those favorites. He loves eating sweets, as John kindly mentioned, and he says that he'll do anything for chocolate. So big fan of sweets. So food's really important to him in his quality of life. He's always been a really fast, a really impulsive eater. And he has occasionally coughed while eating. You've observed this for years. His coughing has gotten a little bit, it's increased over time. And you, as a DSP, have noticed that he's had some episodes of airway obstruction. Food's been lodged actually in his throat at times. So the staff, you informed Mr. J's sister of his worsening cough, of airway obstruction experiences. And Mr. J's sister, being incredibly involved and caring, contacted Mr. J's physician, who made a referral to someone like Maya, a speech language pathologist. So perhaps just the two kind of final points that I'll touch on, and then we can delve into some of the specifics and learn from Maya's expertise here, is that this SLP, the speech language pathologist, came in and they wanted to do what was called an instrumental swallowing assessment that Maya can describe and I cannot. And the reason as to why they wanted to do this assessment is so they could understand his risk of aspiration, where food or liquid would be entering his lungs. So they wanted to do this assessment, but Mr. J's sister says, you know what, my brother's gone through a lot lately. He's had some negative interactions with the healthcare system, not interested in the assessment. Because of that, the speech language pathologist decides, based on the information available, you know what, I'm going to recommend that we change Mr. J's diet to minced and moist solids. And Maya can give some examples of what would be encompassed under minced and moist solids kind of bucket. But the rationale is one of incredibly good intention and trying to promote Mr. J's safety, noting that minced and moist solids would reduce his risk of aspiration and choking. And especially considering his limited ability to slow down. I don't know if I mentioned that, but he's a very fast eater. So that's kind of the case that's on the hands. Mr. J's sister has to make a really tough decision. Do I consent to this recommendation and decide that my brother is going to only eat minced and moist solids, or do I let him eat the pizza and the chocolate, knowing there's a really big risk? So this is the decision point. And I'll stop talking now. And I should have mentioned that there's a dog and a child in the background, and the child has just told me that I'm talking too loudly, which is always nice to be told. So, so I'll stop.
Thanks, Andrea. Maybe I'll just add one or two quick things from the case. So I think, as you mentioned, like and you may or may not be familiar with this as a listener, but there's typically two, more than two, but main two categories of swallowing assessments. So one is what we might call kind of a bedside or chair side, or wherever we're seeing someone swallowing an assessment, where we're not able to like directly visualize what is going on, but through various textures that we're seeing them eat and drink, various strategies that we can try, observing things like if they are clearing their throat, if they're coughing, if they complain of things getting stuck, if there's food left in the mouth. There's lots of things that we do at the chair side or wherever to make some kind of determinations and get some information. But we don't have X-ray vision. So often to get more information, when it's indicated, instrumental swallowing assessments might be something called a video fluoroscopic swallow study. Essentially, it's an X-ray. They get a side view and they do an X-ray that's a video while someone's eating and drinking, and they can visualize where things are going, if things are getting stuck, if things are going the wrong way. If they do go the wrong way, is that person able to cough and get it out or not? So it gives more information. Or there's another test where people can pass a camera through the person's nose called FEES, fiber optic endoscopic evaluation of swallowing. That was a long word. And it sits above the pharynx, and we're able to visualize the vocal cords, the airway, the food tube, and see what's happening. So those are kind of the tests that one, I would not say invasive, one with the nose thing through the nose can be uncomfortable for some, but going to a radiology suite and getting an X-ray and the whole process is also a journey that this family has decided they don't want to do. So I guess to clarify, in the case here, the speech language pathologist did do an assessment at the chair side of what they could assess, and kind of when I talk about those safety and efficiency problems, they seem to find some safety concerns. So as we wrote about in the case, difficulties with both chewing and swallowing, which can happen with muscles as you age, maybe slower chewing, hard to clear all the pieces in your mouth when you're eating big chunks of things. And also probably difficulties with the swallowing muscles and airway protection, as well as more cognitive symptoms of dysphagia, of swallowing problems, which may be things like eating really quickly, and even with a visual, and even with reminders, and even with a ton of cueing, not necessarily being able to follow those instructions, or maybe not being aware that there's food left over in the mouth after you've eaten and going to sleep. So we think about all those factors, cognitive factors, muscle factors, all of that kind of led to this recommendation that the speech pathologist wants to discuss with the family. Not tell them, you have to have minced and moist, but open that discussion to say, I think this might be safer. How do we make what might be the right decision for him?
Whew, there's a lot to this. There's a lot to
Yeah.
Mr. J. So I'm just thinking back of the years working with people that have had dysphagia and all kinds of swallowing issues, and special diets and special chopping, the pureed and thicket and all the stuff, all the things. And what direct support professionals often at the top of their concern is safety, right? It's that safety piece. But this is where this is why we're talking. You know what? Does Mr. J have a right to have that darn crispy pizza that he loves so much? Even though if he has it, right, it could be problematic. It could be life-threatening, right? So these are the two questions I think that we can help the DSPs, right? With this balance act, right? So I'll state the questions, and you guys take it away, please. What are some signs that a DSP should watch out for when it comes to food and feeding and eating time, especially when thinking about risks? It sounds like an obvious question, but there are things that they probably should be looking at a little bit more intensely, I guess. And then secondly, are there any things that might be red flags, things that DSPs really should bring forward immediately to whether it's that nurse or doctor or whomever? So take these questions and run with them, because I think this is where DSPs, they really worry, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'll try not to get too into the weeds here, but give a brief overview. But if you want me to expand more, I can.
Sure.
So sometimes we think kind of about the phases of the swallow. Without getting too technical, we have to prepare the food, kind of like the chewing and all of that. Oral preparatory phase is what it's called, but preparing the food. Kind of then there's the oral phase of the swallow where maybe we got to push that food up against the top of with our tongue. We got to send it back to the pharynx in a coordinated way. And then there's kind of the throat, the pharyngeal phase of the swallow, which is, how well is it kind of passing through here? How well are the muscles squeezing the food down the way they should? How well is our airway protected? So if we think about the way our systems are set up, we got in the front our airway, and we have our vocal cords sitting right there. They protect our airway along with many other mechanisms of protecting our airway when we swallow. And then right behind it, we have the food tube. So the esophagus, and we want to make sure things are going the right way. And there's various degrees of problems that can happen in terms of things going the wrong way, right? Sometimes people may just clear their throat, right? It's kind of going a little the wrong way, but they can clear it effectively. It gets ejected. And then there's sometimes times where it's maybe going further down and they're really coughing, or other times where they may not actually notice at all. We may call that a silent aspiration. But all of those pieces really require more of an instrumental assessment to know, like, okay, if they're going, I don't know if it actually went the wrong way. I don't know if they feel like it did, but it didn't. If it did they get it out? Like, these are the questions we can't really answer for our fictional person, Mr. J. And then also we can also think about the esophagus too. If people have reflux, people can also aspirate things that come back up. Things can go down the wrong way from coming back up. So kind of just giving an overview of that. There's lots of pieces. So I would say when the question is like, what are red flags? If we start with kind of more of the oral preparatory phase or the oral phase in general in the mouth, you can think about things a little bit that are more cognitive of like, are they shoving food in their mouth without chewing it
Yeah.
properly?
Yeah.
Are they able to slow themselves down? Are they even noticing that
Yep.
something's coming to their mouth, right? Like, are they aware of the food or drink,
Yep.
and can they anticipate the way that they're supposed to prepare that specific thing?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking
Um,
just if I
yeah,
my
please go ahead.
a lot of I've worked with people, and I know DSPs work with people that have their and I don't know if it's in your purview as a speech and language person, or if it's the dietitian. Pacing goals. Literally,
Yeah.
I've seen it hand over hand pacing goals where a direct support professional has to help somebody who just eats so fast. Usually, people that like lived in institutions and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And there it is. I mean, that's even before the food gets in the mouth. That the person is so, the support needs are so intense. Even before the swallowing and that whatever that process you just described, which I
Yeah.
don't think about. I mean, I don't. Do you think about like when you're eating food, what you're doing? Like you said, putting it to the top of your mouth, and oh my God,
And
think about
pushing
that.
it back. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Next time you take a sip of water, just focus really hard and you'll notice it. Right? Your tongue is pushed up against and kind of shoots
yeah.
we call it a bolus, right? The whole held together thing of liquid or food that we need to control.
Well,
And you also need to time it right, right? Because if you're drinking that sip of water, that's going to be a certain timing versus eating a crispy piece of pepperoni pizza. Your muscles are going to have to adjust differently.
there's so much to this. There's so much to this. And I mean, Andrew, you're going to come into this very soon too, because what are the ethics in terms of holding somebody back from eating their pizza at their pace? At their pace. Because
Yeah.
I'm a fast eater. I'm a New Yorker, so I eat fast. And I eat, you know what? I also eat pizza as I walk down the street. I'm sure that's a no-no for people on certain pacing goals, and God forbid a swallowing protocol. Anyway, I'm sorry. I digress. But it
No,
goes
that's okay.
But what it does, this points to the nuances of what DSPs need to look for. And they're in that place to help somebody so they don't choke or aspirate.
Yeah.
You know,
Maybe I can keep going with a brief overview. So in addition to those
Sure.
more like things about like maybe pacing, are they putting food in their mouth really quickly? Are they aware of what's going into their mouth? We can also look at, their dentition, right? If someone's dentures aren't fitting anymore,
Yeah,
if I didn't have any of my teeth, I wouldn't be able to have crispy pizza either.
right.
So those are some things you might need to think about. And just how well somebody is chewing the food at the end of a meal. Is there kind of food everywhere in their mouth? Are they not managing it? And if that's the case, are they noticing it? Like, okay, maybe there's a few pieces of pizza. If they're going for the water right away and drinking it and it's all fine, maybe that's okay. But if you are about to help them go lie down and you see their mouth is still filled with pizza, that might be a different story. And then in terms of kind of the throat pieces, sometimes we think about signs like changes to someone's voice. Maybe it sounds wet or gurgly. That could be a sign that there's maybe some liquid or food that's going near the vocal cords, which changes your voice. Maybe clearing your throat like that, or coughing. Or episodes of airway obstruction, so choking. Sometimes people confuse coughing and choking, and they think when someone's going, they're choking. When someone's choking, there's no sound. There's the airway is obstructed. So I would say there's a number of different signs you can look for. And I really like your point about we don't have to change people's habits if they're working for them, right? Like I don't need someone to eat slower if it's functional, if it's okay. But what happens when that person who's eaten really quickly their whole life has changes to their chewing muscles and their swallowing muscles, and it's putting them at risk of complications. I'll also add one more thing to my PSA rant for everyone listening who might not know as much. It's often not as simple as like, hey, this is safe or safer and this is not safe. I
Hmm.
think sometimes people have this misconception of like, well, if they're on like, pureed food and the thickest possible drinks, that's the safest, right? But there's actually a lot of literature that not necessarily the thickened drinks are safer. And if they make someone dehydrated because they don't want to eat or drink, or if they don't want to eat the food that they're given because they don't like it, like that's something that's considered too. Um, yeah, so I think there's lots of complicated factors for safety and efficiency. And it's really our job, again, not to be prescriptive and say, this is what you need to do, but to try to kind of be that detective and figure out like what are the factors going on that might be impacting this person's chewing and swallowing, the safety and the efficiency, and how can we work together to pull a few different levers to find out what's safest. Because there's also people who walk around aspirating all the time. Food or drinks go the wrong way, but if they're ambulatory, they can walk around themselves, they can cough, they are overall healthy, they can fight infections well. They may not have any problems with that. There's lots of factors besides just is it going the wrong way or not that we consider when making decisions, which lots of factors that place people at more or less risk of the pneumonia happening if something goes the wrong way.
There you go. Segue, baby. Segue. Decision making, right? Decision making. What are the factors that people with disabilities or those that help them, the DSPs, family members, whomever, may consider when deciding whether, and if so, how to implement a diet texture recommendation? Oh, the dreaded diet texture recommendation. Go.
For sure. Maybe I'll actually, if it's okay, Andrea, I don't know if you want to start from more of like the ethical consideration piece, and then I can jump in with a little more of the technical pieces too.
Sure, yeah, no, happy to. And I'm loving the technical pieces because some of even the words that you're using and describing, I'm like, this is good to know. Like I so this is awesome. Um, so oh, I'm talking too loud. I understand. Okay. It's one of those days, everyone who's watching, so it's fine. I'm going to turn up this little show and we're going to get on to talking about different considerations for decision making. So every single one of us, whenever we have to make any decision, is going to be based on a whole number of things. At the foundation, at the start, it's probably going to be based on values that we might have, preferences, life experiences. And so, if a person with a disability, without a disability, if there is a support system in place to help someone like Mr. J make decisions, what I like to recommend as an ethicist is okay, tell me what matters to the person themselves, right? Or tell me what matters to you, Mr. J. Um, are they saying things like, safety is the goal, the utmost goal. Living for the longest period of time is the goal. Going to social events is the goal. Like, what are some of the goals? What are the values? What are the preferences? Have they had really bad experiences? Has Mr. J had really bad experiences eating a crispy pepperoni pizza in the past that has led him to be admitted to a hospital? And that hospital experience was horrible. Okay, these are all really relevant considerations when it comes to decision making. And I like to say, and then I'll pass it off to Maya, that there's two parts to making any decision. So as Maya beautifully highlighted, there's all this clinical expertise that someone like a language pathologist can bring to the table, and they can make, based on this brilliant clinical expertise, they can make a recommendation, and that's what it is, which is what Maya said. It is not a prescriptive, you must. It is, here's my recommendation from my lens. That's the first part of decision making. But the second part that sometimes gets left out of the picture
Mm.
is the person's values and preferences and how they map on to that recommendation or not.
Yeah.
And so I like to think of those two parts, and then we kind of go back and forth to figure out, well, is safety the utmost goal? And if so, what does that mean? And if not, if quality of life, it makes sense to prioritize based on Mr. J, let's say, then okay, maybe you'll recommend some of the recommendations, but maybe you'll say, for good reason, we're actually not going to recommend or implement some of the other diet texture recommendations, and maybe we'll reevaluate in a week, in a few months. Maya, do you have thoughts about that? Or John, does that resonate with you?
Sure. I'll give it to Maya. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think that's a great point. And just to add to it, often there's like multiple options for recommendations, right? Like I think hopefully as a clinician, people are taking the approach. It's not like, hey, you should have mince and moist, goodbye. It's like, okay, what are the again levers we can pull of, for example, like I do have those conversations with people about, and it's harder for the case of Mr. J when I will have that conversation with him, but if it's hard for him to fully appreciate the risks and benefits, but if I'm speaking to someone who's making their own decision, let's say, and they can decide, you know what? I don't care enough about the pepperoni pizza. I'll stick with the spaghetti and I'll stick with the chocolate and I'll eat them slowly because the pepperoni pizza is the main culprit of the scary things that happen to me. And it's not that important in my life.
Yep.
And I'm going to do that's fine with me. But
Yep.
the same person who has the exact same profile of swallowing problems may make a different decision and say, this is like the most important thing for me ever. I had a pepperoni pizza tasting show when I was younger, like whatever it is. And I think that those personal factors and making different small decisions versus are you going to follow it or not? There's so much in the middle there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, can I share a story that you just inspired me to think of, Maya?
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
and John, is that okay?
Sure, please.
I'm hopping right in here. So there was a circumstance I was consulted on, not the exact same as Mr. J, but it was a person who was an older adult and they had a dementia and they were at a very high risk of aspiration and choking. So in that respect, very, some similarities certainly to Mr. J. Um, the speech language pathologist, the dietitian, the physician, everyone was saying that we do not recommend like a full texture diet. We recommend probably, I don't remember what it was, but like minced and moist, maybe. I have no idea what it was. That was the recommendation. And the substitute or surrogate decision maker was this person's wife and said, no, actually, I would like my husband in this case to eat whatever he wants. And the clinical team was so angry, I would
Mm,
say. And that's actually when I got brought in because it was like, Andrea, is this an ethical decision? I spoke with this person's wife. Unfortunately, this person was unable to participate in the conversation in any way, really. But this person's wife said, "Okay, you know what? My husband was a chef. Food was his life. And I can say with absolute confidence that he would rather die eating a hamburger
No.
than be eating whatever it is that you're recommending." And however, to Maya's point, if there is like super, super, super high risk items, tell me about those because maybe I'll avoid those. And then we had a productive conversation. Okay, you're going to avoid lettuce. You're going to avoid whatever it was that the clinicians said were high risk. But we could compromise based on his values.
My
That's
gosh.
the story.
There you go. And what a story it is. It deals with this. The age old question of self-determination, right? And so this kind of deals with your story there, Andrea. If a direct support professional is not comfortable with the decision regarding eating and nutrition, what are they going to do? What do they do? Whether it's that person they're supporting, whether it's the speech and language pathologist, whether it's the dietitian, whether it's the supported decision maker person, whether it's the nurse, whatever. How do DSPs deal with that?
Yeah, Maya, do you want me to kick things off and then pass it over
Yeah,
to
sure. Go
you?
ahead.
Okay, because you as a clinician have potentially, experienced this from that kind of frontline lens too, that you can speak to, which I can't. What I will say is that it makes much sense that direct support professionals who are working with supporting people like Mr. J all the time, you're
Yep.
going to have feelings, you're going to have emotions, you're going to have ideas about what is right and what is wrong, and the intentions are beyond pure. Um, and so I think that's the starting point is that if you're not comfortable with a decision, it's because you care and you know this person so well. And that's amazing. Um, if a substitute decision maker, surrogate decision maker makes a decision that doesn't align with your values, what you think the right decision is, then that can contribute to, John, we've spoken about this before, moral distress, where based on your professional, personal values, belief system, the right thing is just not being done and there's nothing you can do about it. So what I would say, and then I'll pass it off to Maya, is taking a step back to determine, okay, how am I feeling? Is this a symptom of moral distress? Is my feeling
Mm-hmm.
of anger, frustration, a symptom of moral distress? And if so, then there's a stepwise approach that can be taken. And John and I have spoken about this before, and there's frameworks about moral distress that can be followed, right? You're going to take a step back. You're going to seek validation. You're going to explore all of your possible options to ensure that your values can be maintained while at the same time ensuring you are doing your role. And sometimes some reframing. So in the case of Mr. J, maybe you'll want to have a conversation with the speech language pathologist, with the substitute decision maker to better understand that decision making rationale. So even if you don't agree, you can understand it. And that can be quite empowering and comforting. Maya, do you have other thoughts or any experiences around this? Is any of what I'm saying potentially helpful for DSPs from your perspective?
Yeah, I think so for sure. And I think the tricky part too is, those gut reactions and feelings and again, strong reactions because you care about someone so much are so important to listen to and follow all those pathways for moral distress. But I also think that like collaborative decision making and understanding from the clinical team is important too, because I think sometimes things break down when we're a bit on different pages about what the facts are. So this isn't quite Mr. J, but another example of I don't know if anyone listening supports people at the end of life who maybe don't want to eat as much, right? And it can be distressing for lots of people who don't necessarily understand how the process of the body shutting down later in life works, that they were not feeding them all the time and we're not making them eat, right? So I guess in a way that may be moral distress, but in another way, it may be an opportunity for like education that this person actually is comfortable and not in distress, even though you think that they are, right? Or for Mr. J, we can see about even if you think that for him, the pepperoni pizza is the most important thing in the world, maybe he is really happy with the spaghetti and the chocolate and we remove the crust and it's actually okay. So I guess where I'm getting to here is I think absolutely there will be times where a decision is made and you're in opposition to that decision and there's that moral distress process you need to follow, but I think kind of openness on everybody's ends to really understand how everyone's feeling, what's going on, what small changes we can make, to ensure there's not just communication breakdowns is really important too. I
Yeah.
don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that, Andrea, also.
No, I think that that's actually like a brilliant overview of some of the
Yeah.
considerations and both the clinical lens, but also, yeah, thinking about some of the ethical pieces and moral distress.
Yeah. And when that direct support professional is in the middle of uh, that situation, I'll tell you right now, they're often going to err on the side of caution. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think it's very important. And I think the purpose of this conversation, we can't forget a person's self-determination, even though it's something that might be riskier for a person eating a certain thing. We can't just look at your role as a direct support professional being the food police or the swallowing police. And I think a lot of DSPs, they feel that's their role. It's not their role. Yeah, they're going to probably err on the side of caution always, but want them to think a little bit. And back to your chef story, Andrea, it's like, I love that story, but I'll tell you right now, a lot of direct support professionals, he ain't eating that burger. Not on my watch is he going to eat that burger and choke and die. Kind of a different situation, but still, let's raise that bar for direct support professionals to have that consideration of self-determination. That's why they have a code of ethics, right? Balancing physical well-being with self-determination. There's a balance. Let me just soapbox real quick. And it's like this in Canada as it is here in the United States. A little better in Canada, but it's still direct support professionals. They're seen as entry level. If you've done direct support for more than 20 minutes in your life, you realize pretty darn quickly this is not an entry level job. This is a profession. No different than a speech language pathologist, than a bioethicist, than a registered nurse. And all these considerations that we're talking about here, that's why we're doing this webinar, because I want DSPs to raise their bar. It's more than just being the food police, and I think sometimes they feel that.
And John, if I can just say too, I think this is where there's a responsibility on the other side as well, because I worry that DSPs will, be told by someone, hey, Mr. J is going to be eating whatever he wants. Yeah, there's let us know if he chokes. It may not be that kind of conversation, but pull DSPs into the conversation, goodness gracious. Or I hope that DSPs can feel wherever they're working empowered to say, can I get some information as to why? Who made the decision and what's the reason? Because then that can support that. But I worry sometimes any frontline clinician, DSPs, and others are just left out of these huge conversations and decision points that are going to impact them because they're the ones doing the work. So it goes both ways, right?
Yeah. Thank you.
And it might change the decision too. The DSPs that work with Mr. J and have worked with him for forever probably can suggest all these great middle ground solutions based on, he doesn't eat his crusts anyway, so that's not going to be a problem, right? If you're not the one eating with him, you're not going to know. So really, to again, like, remove those power differences and really value people's expertise equally.
Or here's an example. Oh God, I could go on all day about this. So Mr. J, he's into chocolate. He loves chocolate, but it's come to pass that just chewing a Hershey bar or whatever, it's not. It screws up his dysphagia is prevents him from eating chocolate bars, whatever. You know what? A good direct support professional, I've seen it. They'll hook up Mr. J with perhaps some hot chocolate, which is something that he can ingest without having an issue with aspiration or a choking hazard. DSPs are so unbelievably, they help adapt people to situations, whether it's like swallowing, but whether it's physical plant stuff like stairs and just the bottom line is direct support professionals can be really, I think, integral, I guess that's the word, for helping people develop so they can be self-determining. But we have to give them that opportunity, like you were saying, Andrea. So anyway, oh gosh, okay, I got to come back into the yard. I'm coming back into the yard. This is our last question. And this is kind of a big picture question, I suppose. Why is the topic of swallowing? We've kind of talked about this the whole hour here, but why is the topic of swallowing and related ethical dilemmas so important for DSPs to know about? Maybe give your closing thoughts. about why this is so important. It's something I think perhaps DSPs might even take for granted. I don't want them to take it for granted anymore. So what are your thoughts?
Maya, do you want me to start off or do you want to kick things off here?
Maybe I think you can end off the ethicist with the ethical question. I'll go quickly, which is I guess I would just put out the call to like, the people that you work with and support the best, and just to see if you notice changes, if you notice problems, to get those right referrals in. But also because sorry, I was reading the slide as I was trying to answer. Um, just because eating and drinking is such an integral part of everybody's life. And I think just to really drive home that it's not this binary of like, oh, well, someone has a swallowing problem and they're going to see a speech therapist and they're going to make them
Yep.
eat thick and liquid and pureed foods. And oh my God, that's going to be so awful. Like our rules are so much more to also find creative solutions. And just to remind you that our jobs should be and are not to tell you as a patient or tell the person you support what to do, but really to give that picture of information. And even if you don't change anything about the foods or drinks that you are eating, a whole other area is just like safe swallowing strategies we can give you of maybe it's sitting in an upright position, or maybe it's alternating the bites of food you have with sips of liquids, right? There's so many different things we can do and support with to help maximize someone's autonomy and self-determination and enjoyment while also balancing safety too.
Right.
That's also brilliant. Yeah. And I mean, just to, yeah, add on in that ethics piece, I think it's important, similar to what Maya said, because, food, feeding, swallowing, like, this is something that is relevant to everyone. All of us can appreciate the importance of being able to eat what you want to eat. And I would say when it comes to ethical dilemmas and trying to figure out, okay, what should I do? There's around food and feeding and swallowing, food just as a thing is oftentimes seen as a way to demonstrate, love and compassion and care. It is culturally relevant.
Yep.
It is very relevant to certain times of the year. So when these kinds of ethical dilemmas present, they can be very emotional for the people you are supporting and for yourselves. And they're really, really hard. So just drawing attention to the fact that these kinds of circumstances are ethical dilemmas, identifying it, and then kind of having a few ways to go about navigating it, consulting with an SLP, recognizing it's a dilemma that is an ethical dilemma, moral distress that might come along with it, right? That can hopefully support you in navigating them.
Yeah, and I'll just throw one other thing out, just like going back to what you were saying, John, the creativity piece. Like we can all be creative. There's so much that we didn't talk about today too, about like how do you present the food, even if it's
Yeah.
modified, and which items do we pick, and how do we make someone feel part of a meal? Like there's just so much to think about besides just like what is the diet texture, and just to open it up to the ethics and to our role as SLPs to do so much more than that too.
Yep. Wow. Look, thank you both. Maya, Andria, thank you for this conversation. Again, these tend to be conversations that I don't want to stop, but we have to. This particular conversation, I think, could go on a long time because I think direct support professionals, this is something that they probably don't think about. But hopefully, after hearing this conversation for an hour, not only will they think about it a little bit more intentionally, this whole notion of swallowing and supporting people in eating time, something to not take for granted. Just great conversation. Thank you both. Thanks to Chanel and Angie Nethercott, who are our editors and publishers of the International Journal. Always like to give a shout out to them and the founder, Dave Hingsberger, who is since passed, but to our International Journal champions, thank you very much. Any questions that you might have or comments you might have for Andria or Maya, because this is a recorded broadcast, please send them to jraffaele@nadsp.org, and I will make sure I get those questions or comments to our esteemed presenters and authors. And to get the journal, the International Journal, just give me an email and I will give you the link to the journal. We're looking to get it onto its own dedicated website. We're just working on that, and stay tuned for that. But ultimately, reach out to us anytime you have any questions, concerns. But we want to thank you all for joining us for the January 2026 Let's Talk. Once again, thank you, Andria and Maya, for doing this wonderful hour-long webinar. We appreciate you. See you next month. And I'm just going to stop the recording here.